Jonathan Von Tobel was in this chair for about 3 hours before you and I were in here, and is still kind enough to stick around and catch up with us again to talk more things about the big game here. JVT, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you had a long day today. You're watching the game as you're doing the show. That's always an interesting thing to try to do two things at once. What was your takeaway from that second half as you're watching it and seeing the numbers change, I'm sure, dramatically, certainly in that second half?
Yeah, we were tracking it, guys, and as far as I was, as the biggest number I saw was Detroit minus 8.5 at one point in game, and that money line obviously subsequently matching that, and then heading in the direction of San Francisco. But David, it's hard not to focus on the decisions of Dan Campbell, and personally, I fall in the line of following by the rules of win probability and increasing that, and going with the pejorative term, the analytics, right? I like that. And I think that Dan Campbell did make some mistakes in the way that he managed this game, but I think it was mistakes in that, like, before the half, guys, I don't understand how you don't go for that. A lot of win probability models would tell you go for that touchdown instead of kicking a 21-yard field goal to go up 24-7 before the break. The decision to run the ball on a 3rd and goal and then burn a timeout when the timeouts are most important on that final drive, I was amazed by some of the decisions there. I actually liked the attempts to go for it. It's the decision-making in between, and it's the plays that you call when you go for it. You're averaging over 5 yards a carry. Why not run it on one of those 4th and 2s and 4th and 3s? And so I was very surprised by the mistakes that Dan Campbell made, Dave, and I think that's kind of the takeaway when you watch a game like that transpire.
And that's the thing that, with Dan Campbell, John, I don't think Dan Campbell is necessarily a guy that, quote unquote, goes with the analytics that we're going to see a lot of the media discuss in the aftermath of this game. I think this is his time at New Orleans when he was on Sean Payton's staff. And he saw Sean Payton do this a little bit because they had one of the most explosive offenses in the league with Drew Brees, where it's like the idea of putting fear in the defense, of not knowing what you're going to do and being unpredictable. And, unfortunately, with a couple of those play calls, he got predictable.
Yeah, absolutely, Wes. And look, if you want a better example, or there is no better example of him not really following the book, go to that halftime decision, right? Before halftime, to not go for it. By one model's metrics, Wes, when you go for that, again, and for people who don't understand kind of like the concept of this, just going for it, just snapping the ball increases your probability of winning a game. And in that moment, if he just snaps the ball on 4th and 3 before halftime and goes for it, his win probability of that game increases to 4.4%. And if he goes and he gets that touchdown before halftime, the probability of winning that game at the break is 91% or better by some models. I was really amazed, Wes, especially when you look at the way he went for it in the second half. It makes no sense to not go for it in halftime. And then, of course, to your point, it just shows that he's aggressive, but it isn't necessarily by the mathematical aggressive model. And I think we got a good example of that today.
We're talking with JVT, Jonathan Von Tobel. Before we get to the breakdown of the Niners and the Chiefs, let's look at the other game and what went wrong today for the Ravens, because I was sitting on a plus 1250 ticket for the Ravens to win the AFC, and I felt like a genius. And then I felt like an idiot after watching that first half. What really, to you, Jonathan, was the key as to why they could get nothing going after that first touchdown to tie it up at 7?
I'll tell you, I think it boils down to one number, guys, and that number is 6.
Yes.
That is the amount of carries that those running backs got in that game. I was amazed. If you look at different metrics and numbers for the Kansas City Chiefs, and, we've talked to people out in Kansas City, Soren Petro, who covers the Chiefs for 810 out there for the radio station. We've talked about their defensive choice to invite the run, essentially, Kansas City, right? Because their secondary are so good, they'll allow you to run because they want to make sure their passing attack defensively is very sound. But still, it's a run defense that ranks in the mid-20s by many different metrics. How you don't, as a team, run the ball more than you did, especially with your running backs. 16 total carries on the ground for the Baltimore Ravens, guys, 8 of which went to Lamar Jackson, 2 of which went to Zay Flowers. How in the world do you do that against a run defense like that? Dave, I thought that's what it boiled down to. I was amazed. I like aggressiveness on first downs. I like trying to set up second and shorts to keep your playbook open. But the fact that you won't run the ball consistently when this is the defense to do it against, I was amazed by the game plan here offensively, and I think that's what really made a difference for Baltimore.
No, we're right in line here, John, because this was not Todd Monken's finest hour as the offensive coordinator. The two coordinators I felt for Baltimore were just so overmatched today by the combination of Reed and Nagy offensively, even though they were a little more conservative, a lot more conservative in the second half, but especially Steve Spagnuolo, and that's where I want to go here. the blitz got to Lamar again. I thought maybe that the Ravens were going to have that figured out because Houston got to him in the first half, and then he chewed him out in the locker room, and then Houston didn't touch him in the second half. So I thought, okay, this is a good offensive line. They got it fixed, but they had pressure all day, and Kansas City and Spags, they send blitzes at all angles. So you would think that they are going to do that against Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl. Is that at least, before you get in any mathematical modeling or anything like that, is that from a pure matchup standpoint the first thing you look at when you're handicapping this game?
Wes, 100%. And the reason why you're able to do that as a team, right, blitz the way that you are, you have to have trust that your secondary is going to hold up on the back end, right, that they're going to win their matchups, that they're not going to let guys go, because generally when you're blitzing, you're talking about a bunch of one-on-one matchups everywhere else on the field. And Kansas City has the ability to do that with this secondary. And I think they have the secondary to match up with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. They're so sound, guys, on their back end that Steve Spagnuolo is able to do what he does. On the show today, guys, I likened him to, I'm a basketball guy, as you guys know, playoff Rondo, right? Where playoff Rondo would just show up and he would be awesome. And he'd have 21 assists and 10 steals and do whatever. But playoff Steve Spagnuolo is brilliant. He knows exactly what to do. He'd get 2 weeks to prepare for this offense. I can't wait for that matchup, Shanahan versus Spagnuolo. But Wes, to your overall point, I think that matchup works in favor of Kansas City. When you have a secondary that you trust, that can stay in front of their guys, and when they're on islands, respectively, all over the field, and they can hold up so you can blitz and go after guys, I think that's going to be a very big matchup in their favor. And we saw, look, guys, the field goal that the San Francisco 49ers settled for to take their first lead ultimately, back-to-back plays, Brock Purdy takes sacks that takes them out of a potential scoring position. If you can get after them, you can get them down, and I think they're going to be able to do that.
So when you see the line move, you can understand why the Chiefs' money is coming to knock it down from 2.5 to 1. The total has not moved at 47.5 here. Jonathan, what do you make then of either the side or total? It seems like you're leaning Kansas City. Do you have a lean on the total as well?
Yeah, so I'll be fair for audience. I've got a KC ticket at 7-1 to win the Super Bowl that I bet about a month ago. So I will be approaching this a little bit differently. I hope that they're eventually favorites. I'll get a little bit out of this. But I think, Dave, from a total standpoint, it's hard to look away from the under. Just given the way that Kansas City has played here, we know about these unders now to the second half. I think it's 17-2 to the under, the second half totals for the Kansas City Chiefs so far this season. It's because of how good their defense has been and how inconsistent their offense has been. Let's be fair. They got shut out in the second half today against the Baltimore Ravens. I think, Dave, that this lends itself to an under. I think you have two very good defenses. You have an offense in Kansas City that has been inconsistent for times throughout this entire season. And you've got a San Francisco offense that I think can be stymied here by Kansas City's defense, which is playing at an elite level, is being schemed at an elite level, and a quarterback that is here for the first time against a guy who has done it before. So for me, it's Kansas City and under, but I do think from an actual play standpoint, under the total, I feel very good about it. I know some spots open 49. We're down to 47.5. I think 47.5 still playable to the under. I think this is going to be a pretty good physical defensive game that we're going to see here in 2 weeks.
John, you've been out here in Las Vegas for a long time, so you kind of know how the schedule works for Super Bowl week, where it's okay, the props come out very late in the first week, but now we get DraftKings. They put up a fair amount, not the full menu, but certainly we don't have it widespread in the market. I know you hadn't had a chance to look at these yet, but any player or any angle maybe from a prop that you're looking to target based kind of on your handicap of the game that you just gave?
Wes, it's hard not to look at Travis Kelce just because of the way he's been playing, right? We're talking about nearly 300 yards of offense now, 3 touchdowns in 3 playoff games. That connection really seems to be back here for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And I think outside of Fred Warner, you can go after this linebacking crew of the San Francisco 49ers. We saw it at times here today. That middle of the field was pretty open for the Lions. You saw a bunch of a bunch of drops inside of Detroit. So I think that I'm going to look again to have a good day for Travis Kelce. Guys, I had an under on receiving yards for Travis Kelce today. I ripped that up in the first quarter. That thing was done. But he's playing really well, and it's hard not to look at him to have another big day here given the matchup.
You think that MVP bet probably is not going to be popular for Travis Kelce?
Maybe even a wedding proposal afterward. Who knows?
Yes.
Jonathan, appreciate your time as always. Check him out, Hardwood Handicappers. We'll catch up again soon.
See you guys.
There he is, everybody. Jonathan Von Tobel.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.